Deadly and destructive hurricanes, shootings in churches, on college campuses, and at music concerts. Acts of terrorism from the streets of New York City to a mosque in Minnesota. Anti-Semitic threats on Jewish community centers and hate marches at synagogues. And to think, these don't even scratch the surface of the tragic incidents that continue to shake our nation. At a time when many in our community and our country feel helpless and hopeless, Rochester area religious leaders are coming together to discuss the challenges of our time and to offer a sense of hope at a moment when some say it's needed most. Joining me at the desk tonight is the Reverend Marvin McMickle, president of Colgate-Rochester Crozer Divinity School, Sarir Fazli, president of the Islamic Center of Rochester, and Rabbi Peter Stein, senior rabbi of Temple Brit Kodesh. And welcome back to all of you. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So when senseless acts of violence strike, as we see so often in the news today, how do you process these horrific acts, and how do you share a message, bring hope, discuss them with your students, members of your respective houses of worship, and the community? And I'll give this to you first, Marvin.
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is just give folks the resolve to keep living, to not give in, to not be frightened, to not be terrorized. I think in a sense, that's what persons are hoping to do, is to drive you out of your norm, to make you feel uncertain about your daily life. And so the idea that in a place like New York or Las Vegas or any place else where these events take place, that folks just decide the next day I'm going to go on with my life. I'm not going to give in to fear and terror. Now, of course, it would help if we could find a way to rein in the means by which so much of this violence occurs. A madman with a knife is altogether different than a madman with an automatic rifle and a book that holds 100 bullets. So this is a pretty complicated question.
Yeah.
I think, Marvin, I think you've given us a very good introduction, which is we have to begin a response with comfort, with creating a sense of resilience, that we can go on, we can wake up in the morning and do our piece. But I think you began with the word senseless, and I think that, to me, is what's really critical, is that our response has to really be twofold. One is offering comfort and consolation and praying for peace, if that's our tradition. But we can't just rest on that. We have to respond by making changes in the world around us. And when we're talking about human-made violence, it's very different than responding to a hurricane or some other natural event.
We try to give our community a sense of an idea that this is something that we have to trust in the system. We have to trust the process. Whatever is happening outside, we do not believe that it has any religious motivation. We find, in fact, that it is mostly misguided and ill-educated people that are engaging in these acts of violence. We try to instill in our communities that they're part of a broader community. It's not about what religion we follow or a focus on that. It's more about our neighbors, getting the community active, getting them involved in speaking out against these things, and at a large scale. We try not to be insular, and we want to make sure that our communities understand, not just the faith communities, but outside, that everybody is being affected by this. Yeah. It's not just the Muslims, the Jews, whoever. This is something that is affecting us because people are watching us and seeing the response that we're going to give, almost like we're being incited to do things or say things that are otherwise inappropriate. We will not do that. And the best thing that comes out of these things is the ability for us to get together and educate not just ourselves, but everybody else as to where we stand and how we stand and how we are standing together.
To slightly follow up with that, when we hear about people misusing religious text, whether it be from the Bible or the Quran, and they, in relation to anti-Semitism, terrorist acts and that kind of a thing, how then, when that happens, how then do you feel as though it's necessary to respond?
So I think that that's also one of the critical responsibilities that we have as religious leaders, which is when someone makes an act of violence in the name of whichever religion, we have to demonstrate that that is not what the religion is about. That is not what the religious texts of our traditions have to say. And that comes, I think, from two places. One is teaching and modeling from our own faith tradition, but the other is also demonstrating friendship and allyship with people from other religious traditions. That in Rochester, we're blessed to have these relationships between our religious traditions, so that we are able to say, if an act comes in the name of whichever tradition, we can step in and say, these are our friends, we know these people, we know their traditions, and that's not what their religion is about any more than it's what our own religion is about.
So as a case in point, while I'm the president of Colgate Divinity School, Peter Stein teaches for us in the area of Jewish studies. We also have persons from the Muslim faith who teach on our faculty. So the idea that we are modeling a kind of a world community of religious life for our students, for our faculty, for our staff, and I hope for the broader community. But there's a wonderful verse in Acts 17. And every time I hear somebody who wants to isolate and sort of minimize a particular group, there's this verse from the Apostle Paul, from one blood God made all nations to dwell together on the face of the earth. And if we could just remind ourselves that all of us are in the end of the same family of God, and not let anybody try to push us apart into rivaling groups, one against the other.
I'm curious, and I see you're starting to say something, I don't know if this will tie in, but do you find yourselves emerging as news breaks, of things happen, whether incidents of violence and so on, do you find your roles, all of you are in leadership positions, kind of emerging more in the political realm? Because people do seek you for advice and for counsel. Do you find that that is happening more? Are you aware of that happening more?
I think my community, I'm going to say especially, if there is an act of violence perpetrated by a Muslim, it becomes Islamic or Muslim terrorism. When there are acts of violence being perpetrated ostensibly or allegedly in the name of some other religious background, you don't hear that religious name being used as the adjective. And what it does is it does mark us, it scars us a little bit, so that when you talk now about the political side of things, people in our community feel the need to be much more political. They're trying to get their message across, and they feel that if the narrative is being spun against us in so many different ways, we need to be able then to start writing the narrative. And if that means that we have to take to the streets, get people elected, canvass, show our strength, make people hear our voice, in a way, that's what's happening. And it's coming from communities that until now had been relatively silent in the whole political process. They are immigrants. They are not used to being able to exercise their franchise. It was always exercised upon them. And now they're seeing that the way forward, as I said earlier, in trusting the system is using what's available to them and maximizing their numbers.
The Reverend Myra Brown of Spiritus Christi here in Rochester, she wanted to join us today, but she had a scheduling conflict. However, she did share these words for this program. I believe that we are in a time where the challenges of male aggression, gun violence, racism, racial tension, poverty, and unrestrained pocketed moral outrage appears to be calling us as a nation and society to act more boldly and relentlessly for justice and peace. How would you respond to that? And if you agree, how do we make it happen?
So I love what she had to say. And while I recognize that all of this is inherently political, I view it really more as civic engagement as religious leaders. And recognizing that with so much of the violence that we've witnessed, that it is being done in a racist way, in an anti-Muslim way, in an anti-immigrant way. And so the behavior that I hope to model as a religious leader is to say that my religious tradition and my leadership roles as a rabbi in the community is to say that we speak for immigrants, we speak for those of different racial identities. We build friendship and closeness between the Muslim community and the Jewish community, so that we can combat those terrible adjectives, as Sarir said, those adjectives that are used so quickly, but really don't make sense in my mind.
Myra's comment reminds me, pardon me for the use of this Greek word, parrhesia, which translates into bold speech. And that what I think we need are persons of moral conviction who are prepared to engage in bold speech. That's the same word that was used by concerning Socrates. He said the reason the people of Athens were against him was because he was prepared to speak boldly about what he believed to be true. And I think what we're all saying is, to the extent that we are prepared to speak boldly about the things that we know to be true, believe to be true, and against the things that we believe to be false and ungodly, Myra's point, I think, is exactly that. Somebody has to stand up, speak out boldly, and it also comes with a sense of, without a great deal of concern about the consequences to yourself for what you have just said. If you're afraid to speak, you'll always hedge your bet.
In the last 2 years, there have been some pretty targeted, focused issues or attacks on the Muslim community internationally as well as domestically across the country, and even in Rochester. Without even having to ask, the interfaith community sprang up as a shield to say, not with this group. Before the Muslims had a chance to speak, the interfaith community took 2 steps forward and said, we got this. Her words, ironically, I think were put into action at least a year ago, if not a little longer, at the time of the election. We see very bold statements coming from our friends, our neighbors, our well-wishers. We, in turn, will make bold statements in support of simply what's right. When people were desecrating Jewish cemeteries across the country, I took a step. I called a couple of my friends in the press. They said, how does this affect you? I said, it most certainly affects me. I said, these are our friends, and this isn't even something about, you know, an act of violence. I said, this is the basic of the base, and somebody has not learned from a very early age how to be a normal, regular, nice human being. We're not going to allow this. And we took the step.
Well, unfortunately, we have to close for now. Time goes by way too quickly. But this was certainly a much needed and appreciated conversation. So thank you to all of you for your time and for weighing in on this discussion.